David, I'm thrilled to be here today and to see before your family and many, many friends and admirers you being honored so justly so. David is a remarkable person, as you've seen, as the previous comments have attested to, as the beautiful film talked about. I've known David for several decades in several guises. When I was at the State Department, I was director of the Israeli office. I was a desk officer there before, so that's where I first met David and all his wonderful colleagues at AJC. And then I also had a career that 3 times took me to Greece, and when I was a political officer in the 80s, the number 2 in the 90s, and then the ambassador a few years after that, I was honored and privileged to have David and Jason and all their colleagues from AJC frequently coming to Greece and advocating on behalf of not just Greek Jews, but human rights more generally. So I don't think there's any better choice than David for this award. This is not a setup. I'm kind of, near the end of the order of the speaking, but I had a feeling that there'd be a lot of people extolling the virtues of David and what he's done before me, and so I'm not going to do that. Instead, what I want to do is I want to talk about behind every person like David who's honored, there are people who are responsible for it. Now, this doesn't take anything away from the remarkable things that David's done with his life. But what I'd like to do is I'd like to share with you some observations that I've gotten from unknown sources, and they will remain unknown, about 3 people who've had a remarkable effect on David's life. And I think to really understand David, it's important, and it's true with any of us, to understand any remarkable person. It's important to know the people who've had such a big effect on his life. And this is his father, his mother, and his wife. First, his father, Eric. David's dad's story reads like an adventure. He was born in Budapest in 1920, and he spent his early years, unlike many of us, one step ahead of the Nazis in death. All of this was chronicled in a beautiful letter that David wrote to his father earlier this year, 15 years after he passed away. While the letter, which I was fortunate enough to see a lot of, is far too long to read here, I would like to share with you a few sentences at the end of the letter so that you can get a good idea of the man who had such a tremendous influence on David and why David does what he does today. This is the letter. At a time when many kids today are thinking about their bar or bat mitzvah or social life or summer camp, my dad was on the run from a psychopath who wanted to wipe all Jews off the face of the earth. When many kids today are planning for their freshman year of college, my father was forced to shine the boots of Nazi officers. When many kids take their family gatherings for granted, my father did not see his parents between the ages of 14 and 26. And when many kids today think about their post-college plans, my father was trying to figure out how to escape from a brutal prison camp in western Algeria. So I can't say that I ever learned to drive from my father, or how to play baseball, or how to handle my first date. But in the long run, I was exposed to something no less valuable. I saw up close the example of a man whose courage knew no limits, and who, together with like-minded men and women, saved the world from Hitler. I saw a man who never boasted about his daring exploits, but who simply did what he knew had to be done. And then when it was over, simply tried as best he could to get on with his life in a new country. a new country, a new culture, and a new language. And I saw a man who stubbornly believed that tomorrow could somehow be better than yesterday and never stopped trying to make this a reality. Good lessons all. That's the letter that David wrote to his dad 15 years after his dad passed away. Then there's David's mother, and I forgot to ask, is your mother here? Okay, she couldn't. Who lived an equally remarkable life as a young Jewish woman, staying one step ahead of the death camps, and then as a refugee of various regimes, who, like so many Americans, and this is the American dream story, arrived in New York City many, many years ago. David wrote a letter to his mom earlier this year, and in that letter he concluded, "So I absorbed, or at least tried to, some of life's most important lessons. And fortunately for me, they didn't come from a book off the shelf of pop psychology in a section of a bookstore, but from an authentic source, a PhD in living life." That was to his mother. And finally, and it's already been mentioned that David's wife unfortunately can't be here today, but his 3 children and daughter-in-law are. I want to say a word about David's wife, Julietta. She also had a remarkable history. She was born in Libya, not where too many Jews are born these days. But she was born at a time when the Libyan Jewish community was a thriving community, and she was fortunate enough to get out just ahead of when the terrible things that befell the Jewish community in Libya. Her story as a Jew who grew up in various environments that were hostile to Jews at the time, no doubt served as inspiration to David and the work he has done on behalf not only of Jews around the world, but more generally on behalf of oppressed people around the world. In a tribute that Julietta wrote to David 7 years ago at the AJC 100th anniversary meeting, she described David as both totally devoted to his work and a wonderful father to his 3 sons. She also said that David believes in what he does and stands up for what he believes in, be it the rescue of Ethiopian and Soviet Jews, traveling to Israel when Scud missiles were being launched by Iraq, or helping to rebuild black churches in the South. She also said that David is an eternal optimist. He never gives up and never gives in. He believes in the power of individuals to make a difference. And finally, she characterized David as a modest person. And this is why all this material that I have, I couldn't get anything out of David. I had to get it from other sources. He's never believed, ever in his life, that the exceptional things that he has done are anything but ordinary. I think you'll all agree, once again, that we are indeed fortunate to be honoring such a remarkable man. Thank you very much.
Tom, if you could come forward with David so you can present the Chrysostomos Award. Tom, why don't you do the honors and we can get a picture.